Have you ever thought about your manuscript like a garden? Did you know that your story needs to be planned and pruned just like that garden? Well, that's what I want to talk about today. And I want to talk about the whole process of having your manuscript edited and how it relates to gardening. By the way, my name is Travis D. Peterson. I am a book designer as well as a fellow children's book author. And I am wanting to help self-published authors create books that children will love and parents will cherish. So if you are a children's book author, stick around. This content will really help you. Now, for the past few years, I've been planning or really dreaming about starting a homestead, finding a nice, good sized lot and building a house, building a garden, having some livestock to really become more self-sufficient for our family and to give our family kind of that project to work on together. It's really been a dream of mine for a few years now. I hope that I can reach that dream, but it's also related to writing books. And so I want to give you three different editing stages that should be involved with your manuscript and how it sort of relates to this topic of homesteading. Now, one thing I've learned about homesteading is one of the best ways to plan a homestead is to use this term called permaculture. Now, if you're not really familiar with gardening, you probably don't know what that term means, but basically it's planning the whole property to work together naturally, kind of like a natural ecosystem that helps the crops and the garden, the animals to really be self-sufficient on its own. It actually, it makes it work less and simpler. And it's also much easier for the gardener, the owner of the homestead. And so it's just a way of sort of planning where you put the animals, where you put different um, crops and different plants and trees, where you might have some water elements in the garden to really benefit the whole property. And it's a very interesting way of thinking about gardening. But anyways, I really believe this does relate to your manuscript. And so that's what I want to get into. Um, in previous videos, I've talked about what you can do as a self-editor before you get to the point of hiring a professional editor. So today I want to talk about what that looks like to have a professional editor or even multiple editors work on your book to prune that manuscript and perfect it for publishing. Now, I say multiple editors because there's three different stages that you want to think about, and each stage might require a separate editor. Now, you may have the same editor do all three, but there might be times when you need multiple to fill those spots. So, first of all, the first step is developmental editing. Now, when you're planning a piece of property for gardening or for homesteading, it's best to start from the very beginning when you first buy the property and you're looking at it sort of from a bird's eye view. You're looking at the whole piece of land. You're deciding where the house is going to be, where your garden's going to be, where your 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 tree is it tree forest? I forget what they call it, but um, fruit forest maybe, whatever. Anyways, you're placing these different things. You're deciding, okay, should the chickens be close to the house, or should they be over here by the trees, or should they be uphill so that as the chickens do their business, all of those good nutrients flow down into the garden and provides nutrients for your garden and for your crops. You could also think about where you plant your crops. Is it in rows like a traditional garden, or is it more like in circles or in groups close to the sidewalks or walking areas on your property so that you can easily, um, you know, pull weeds, harvest, all these different things. So it's a more bird's eye view. You're looking at the whole property. A piece of property can also be called a plot. And so I think that plot also is very similar to the developmental stage of editing, where the editor looks at the whole story and they're looking at the plot and making sure that the different parts of the plot are where they belong, that things are arranged correctly to, to be well received by the reader. And so they're looking for plot holes. They're making sure your plot is well organized. So after you've passed this stage, and of course that it may take several times going through there, it's it's so important to do the developmental editing before you go to an illustrator, because a lot can change in developmental edit. Your whole story can be restructured. And if you've already had it illustrated, that means going back and having it re-illustrated. So you'll save a lot of time and energy and money if you do the developmental stage before you have it illustrated. So then the second stage of editing is line editing. And that's where we go from the bird's eye view. When we come in a little closer, now we're looking at not only lines, but paragraphs and making sure that they are structured correctly. Now, if we go back to the homesteading, the permaculture analogy, this is a lot like making sure different groups of plants are together, different animals are together. Those animals can really benefit each other if they're together. And some animals, maybe they need to be separated. Same with the plants. There's plants that can provide nutrients to the soil and help each other, or they can, help to fight off different pests or different things like that. And so grouping these things together on the property is more related to line editing, because you're zooming in a little bit more. You're looking at certain areas of the story. Now, a good line editor, will be looking for different things like unnecessary repetition, complex sentences, run-on sentences, making sure that it fits the age group that you're aiming for, inconsistent verb tenses. Are you guilty of that? Maybe you start off a paragraph using present tense and then you go into past tense and not really knowing that you've made that mistake. Here at the line editing stage, you're also thinking about rhyme and meter. So it's important to have a line editor, if you write in rhyme and meter, that has a specialty in working with poetry or rhyme for your children's book. Now, just to share a little bit of a story, my first book, Ada and the Helpers, and this is kind of funny. I started with the title Ada Gets Her Break, and I spelled Ada very specifically because of a couple of different reasons. I spelled the name Ada Aida. And as I got to the editing stage, I had someone who was very good at editing rhyme and meter. And she kept telling me that there was an extra syllable in my story at several different places. And I couldn't quite figure out what she meant, because I couldn't find that extra syllable anywhere, but it was going off the meter. And eventually I realized it was the name Ada. I was spelling it Aida, and I didn't realize that in many parts of the world, Aida is pronounced Aida, and I didn't know that. So I ended up having to change Ada's spelling to Ada, which can be pronounced Ada or Ada, but it still only has two syllables, so it fits the meter of the story. So that's why I ended up going with that. So I just say all that to to reiterate that it's so important to have that line editor looking at your rhyme and meter if you have that, but also looking at sentences and making sure that they're structured correctly, making sure they match your age group, all of that. Now, the third editor that you need to think about, or the third stage in editing, is proofreading. So we've gone from the bird's eye view to different areas of the garden. Now we're getting even closer to each individual plant in the garden. And that's what a proofreader does. So you may be looking at that plant for, you know, some plants might have disease that you need to pull out. Some might have those pesky bugs or weeds growing around them. You need to prune them back every now and then and make sure they're, full with fruit, all those sorts of things. And it's the same with proofreading. And this, it happens a lot in line editing as well. But they're looking for things like they're looking at each sentence, each phrase, word, punctuation to make sure they are correct. They are looking for misspellings, grammar mistakes, overused commas and other punctuations. I often see misused dashes. So, there's 3 different dashes you can use, and which one is appropriate here or there. An editor or a proofreader can make sure you have the correct punctuation throughout your manuscript. Now, I personally think that proofreading should happen twice. You should have it done after it's been edited developmentally and by line. So this will be a third stage before you have it illustrated. And then you can have it proofread again after you've had it illustrated and designed, the whole book laid out. Because when you introduce the artwork, that might actually change some things. And there can even be some mistakes made during the design process, the laying out or formatting of your book. There can be some mistakes made in the manuscript, in the story or the front or back matter, on the cover. Things happen. So it's best to have a proofreader, especially at that stage. You might be able to skip the one before it's illustrated, but don't skip the proofreading stage after it's been completely laid out, designed, ready to send to the printer. Have it proofread. Have them look at every single punctuation, every spelling, and make sure there are no mistakes throughout your book. I just had a discussion with one of my clients, one of my authors, a couple of days ago about, those small mistakes that you find in your book after you've already had it printed. And it's so easy to miss those. Even the editors can miss them at times. So having several different stages of editing will help you to catch those small mistakes. And really, this is so important for children's book authors. You may think that, okay, my manuscript is less than 500 words. Why do I need to have it professionally edited? Let me tell you, do it anyways. It's not a big expense. Go ahead and get your book edited professionally. Follow these 3 stages of editing to have your manuscript properly pruned and manicured and planned from the very beginning, and you will harvest a beautiful crop. Your book will sell because it will be professionally edited and prepared for your readers, your avatars, your audience in mind. I hope this is helpful. By the way, I am writing a book called The Indie Author's Dozen, and it's all about how to plan and put together your own self-publishing team, including your editor or multiple editors. So if you would like a little sneak peek at that book, you can actually download the introduction chapter by going to indieauthorsdozen.com. So I invite you to go check that out, download that introduction chapter, and in so doing that, you can also join my beta team and get access to additional chapters to sort of preview and offer your own feedback on those chapters as I get ready to send my book to a professional editor here within the next few weeks. So I really appreciate that. If you found this content helpful, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and let me know down in the comments, which editing stage do you think is most important? Let me know in the comments. Thanks a lot and good luck with pruning your manuscript.